We are here in Albuquerque tonight. David and I were supposed to be here on foot by Albuquerque. We're actually about 80 miles west of here. So today we put in about 17 miles, then we piled in the truck and drove here to do this presentation tonight. So we welcome you to this great, big, beautiful, I guess it's called the Albuquerque Main Library. And we're glad to be here. So in this great, big, beautiful room, we have Matt and Alec with us here tonight. We're very glad that you are here with us. We're traveling across the country, running for a GMO-free USA. So there's two big components to what we're doing. One is the run, and the other part is the GMO part of it. And some people are interested in the running part of it. Some people are interested in the father and son thing, or the family thing, how we're living together in very tight quarters for 6 or 7 months to do this. We're running 20 miles a day, 6 days a week. Today we had a terrific cold headwind, and it was freezing us. My face is still red, I think, from the headwind all day long. So anyway, we're still on the front end of our trip. I feel like we've preached to a whole lot more cacti than we have to people since we started out in Huntington Beach on January 18th. I am the author of We're Monsanto, Feeding the World Lie After Lie. This book came out last October, just prior to the March Against Monsanto, the second March Against Monsanto this last fall. And more than 3,000 people downloaded a free Kindle version of it prior to the March. So I'm pretty pleased that many people got to see it. When a self-published author gets to get 3,000 books out there, boom, in a week, that's a pretty cool thing. So this can be pretty informal tonight. I don't know whether you guys have a lot of knowledge about GMOs or a little bit of knowledge, or I prefer just to talk about running, or talk about our experience running, talk about GMOs, talk about what issues there are, what your perceptions might have been, or what they might be now, and just have a discussion on the whole topic. A lot of questions I've thrown out there, but let's give that a shot. Okay, Alex says I'm looking at Matt here tonight.
Well, I'd like to hear about, both. I mean, I have an idea. I mean, it's your son's idea about to do the whole thing, or was it?
David, can you talk with a big voice to the camera here and tell the story?
Well, it started out a few years ago. My dad showed me an internet article on something. I don't know where it was, but he showed it to me, and it was about this girl named Jazzy Jasmine. Oh, that was her nickname. And she had just finished running across the country, like coast to coast, and she was 17 years old, and she was the youngest girl to have ever done it that we know about. There might have been someone who didn't document it all, but recorded. She's the youngest one who's ever done it. And when I heard about that, I started thinking of all these great things that could come out of it and what I could do after, and pretty much just how fun it would be for me, because at that time I still really liked running. And so I told my parents, when I heard about that, I thought about what we could do and stuff. And I told my parents that I wanted to do this, just sort of being a little kid and wanting to do big stuff. And then it took a while, and my parents finally decided that we were going to do this, and now we're doing it.
Yes, now we're doing it. It was a big step for us, because we're like any middle-class family. You just don't quit your job and go off and do something that's going to be hugely expensive, but we decided to do that. So we ran an Indiegogo campaign, which was helpful, but there's still a lot of expenses involved. But we're doing it, and we're crossing the country, and it's truly an intense experience, 24/7 with the family, 20 miles a day with David on the road, which equates to 5.5 or 6, sometimes one day it was even 7 hours. And I know as an athlete, you do the math, you go 6 hours, 20 miles, that's, you could crawl that speed. And I recognize that. I recognize that we're not going fast, but when I talk to the people who do these USA crossings, they say, Brett, that's the way we do it. We don't ever run up hills. We take it slow. We just go according to what our bodies are able to do. And so day after day, it's 20 miles, and it's, you know, it's not a PR or anything. But for us, you know, David's 15, and he is the first 15-year-old to cross the country. Did it in 1928, and David's the second in 2014. So that's quite an accomplishment for a 15-year-old. And I'm not a super jock by any stretch of the imagination, so 20 miles a day is a huge deal for me.
Yeah, when David was talking, I had a question to ask him.
Let me just blather, and if things come up, by all
Well,
means.
it was a related question of how much support. I mean, like I said, I listened to the Rick Troll, and he asked some of these questions too about what does your friends think and stuff like that. Some of them were fairly supportive, and some of them thought it was crazy. It's probably true for whatever, but.
And I think both points are valid. We are crazy. This is a crazy thing to do. There's only about 300 people that have ever done this. And now that we're on the road, we know why. This is not an easy thing to do. Oh yeah, it takes a huge family commitment to work together to make it happen day after day. The way it works logistically, we get up in the morning. Usually Kris will drive us to the place where we finished running the day before, drop us off. We've got our seed stroller. This is our seed box, and in it we've got our daily supplies, which include the bottom of the box. I've got a copy of my book, and occasionally we meet people, and after I give them some seeds, sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 times or several times a day, we'll meet people and they say, what are you doing? And we say, we're talking about GMOs, we're talking about a GMO for USA, we're talking about organic seed versus GMO seeds, and so it's very interesting. Nearly all of the time people say, GMO what? And they have no idea what we're talking about. So we're starting at ground zero with virtually everyone. And even in California, where they had Prop 37 back a year and a half ago, even there, people really didn't even know what GMO stood for. So we find that the knowledge base across the U.S. is really, really small. Those that do know are all over our mission. They say, yeah, of course we're against GMOs. Why would anyone not be against GMOs? We've never found anyone on the road yet that said, wait a minute, Brett, we need these things. You know, I read that on the internet, and sometimes people have commented on my webpage, and they say, Brett, we need the poison, we need the GMOs, or billions of people are going to die. I read that occasionally, I get those sort of comments, but on the road, no one's ever done that before. So we explain what we're doing. We say our website is runningthecountry.com. We invite people to go to our webpage and read up on it. And then some people who are really interested, we say, hey, if you'd like to learn more, I've got a book, We're Monsanto, Feeding the World Life, July. And occasionally people give donations, and we give out a copy of the book. So this is the seed box. In addition to the seeds and the book, we've got the Band-Aids, we've got some rope, we've got sunscreen, light, pump for the seed stroller, tire kit for the seed stroller. So that's what goes with us every day underneath the stroller. And we've got our food and gear, and we've packed our dog Angel on several of the journeys, but she's about 15 years old, and lately she's been saying, come on guys, I'm a little too old for this. So sometimes lately she'll do a 2 or 3 mile stretch with us, but that's about it. Anyway, as for GMOs, there's 2 main types of GMOs nowadays. I bet Alec knows what both of them are, right? Okay, you're right on the money. The first one is the Roundup-resistant seed. Okay, and the Roundup, the scientists at Monsanto discovered that there was a bacteria that did not die in the presence of Roundup. And Roundup is their top-selling herbicide. An herbicide that kills plants. So when they discovered that this bacteria stayed alive in the presence of Roundup, they said, wow, why don't we put this in our food supply? And that's what they did. They injected that, literally with it like a gun blast. They injected the genes from this bacteria into corn and soy and other plants. And then they found they would take all of these seeds that grew and find the one that grew the best way, because when they inject these genes into the seed, they have no idea what part of the DNA that's going to land in. And it can create all sorts of mutant creations. So they take the one that looks the most like corn and soy, and they test it to see if it really did, if the gene really did take into the new plant. And then they do that through an antibiotic-resistant marker, which is kind of strange in and of itself, because they're actually giving the plant an antibiotic trait. And they also give it a promoter gene. The promoter gene enables that bacteria to be turned on. So that gene is always on, it's always functioning. And we know, modern scientists, independent modern scientists, know that when you do the antibiotic-resistant marker, you do the promoter gene, that you're not just taking one gene from a totally unrelated species and precisely and scientifically placing it in the new plant to create this new corn, for example, that's totally unchanged, except that it can withstand the presence of Roundup. It causes all sorts of collateral damage in the corn. And some of the things it might do is turn on an allergenic protein, a protein that's always been there, but it's been turned off before in nature. But then you mess around with this stuff, a protein gets in there, it gets turned on, and all of a sudden you've got people getting allergic reactions to corn, something that's never happened before. Okay, so that the Roundup Ready gene is the predominant type of GMO that's on the market today. The second, David, do you remember what the second one is?
What was the first?
The first one was Roundup Ready seeds, and the second one is BT, which stands for that great big word,
Bacillus thuringiensis.
Bacillus thuringiensis. And that is another bacteria that exists naturally in the ground. It's an organic, when organic farmers gather it up, they can actually spray that on their organic crops, and it's still called an organic crop because it washes off. Once you spray that on the crop, it washes away, and you can still say, yeah, this is clean, it doesn't have anything that's against the classifications to get the organic certification. But what they did is they took a gene from the BT, the bacteria, and they injected that into corn. And so now, instead of having a pesticide, a bacteria that exists on the surface of the corn, now every single cell of the corn plant, from the root to the tip top to the corn itself, is producing BT. And what BT does, when a bug comes along and eats the BT corn, it swallows it and it causes the bug's stomachs to explode. Okay, a rather unsavory process for the bugs. Of course, they die from it, and the farmers love that because they don't like the little critters chewing on the corn, so they eat the BT corn, they die, and the farmers are happy because now they've got a clean corn that they can take to market. And then the Monsanto scientist says, but of course, what it does to bugs, it's not going to do to humans because we have different sorts of pathways in our body, different sorts of genomes, so that BT does not affect human beings. And now again, through more studies, independent studies, we're finding that we've got tons and tons and tons of bacteria within us. And so we're not just human beings, we're human beings plus all these independent creatures that live inside of us, and there's this symbiotic relationship that makes us have a healthy gut bacteria. So when you start messing around with Roundup Ready, you eat that. You start messing around with BT and you eat that. We're now finding that BT can cause poke holes in the stomach lining of the human stomach. And we know that when you get that, you get the leaky gut, you get pieces of undigested material that get into your bloodstream that never should be there. And when that happens, you've got an immune response and that your body goes out and says, whoa, we've got a foreign invader in the blood, let's go attack it. So in the last 20 years or 16, 17 years since GMOs have been introduced, there's been a corresponding increase with all sorts of modern illnesses. Back when I was a kid, I don't know that I'd ever heard the phrase gluten intolerance. Have you ever heard gluten intolerance before? Nowadays, it's hard to find a person who doesn't say, Oh yeah, I'm gluten intolerant, okay? We've got gluten intolerance, celiac disease, we've got irritable bowel syndrome. Autism used to be 1 in the thousands, I believe, when I was a kid, and now they're saying it's getting close to 1 in 50. And this is just in the last 30 or 40 years. So people are saying, what's changed? And so Nancy Swanson, she writes for the Seattle GMO Examiner, she said, connect the dots. It's not food. It's not sugar. It's not gluten. It's not wheat. Because we've been eating all those things for forever. That's not the problem. She says, what's changed in the last 15 or 20 years? It's glyphosate. Glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup. Roundup is the herbicide that we're spraying on everything. Okay? So because we're now ingesting Roundup, Roundup is also patented not only as an herbicide, it's also patented as an antibiotic. It's also patented as a metal chelator. Mineral chelator. And what that means, if you take Roundup, spray it on your ground, it attracts, it binds the minerals to it. Okay, so now you've got a soil that's getting saturated with Roundup. The minerals become unavailable to the plant. So here you've got a plant. Thank you, Lulu. You've got a plant that needs its food in order to grow healthy, and it gets that food through the minerals in the ground. These minerals are no longer available in a Roundup-ready environment. And so these plants are literally starving. Even though they're growing and they're not dying, they are starving. There was a study out of Canada that showed that they compared BT corn to conventional corn, and conventional corn had 437 times the calcium that the BT corn had. And then there was magnesium and manganese also that were multiple numbers higher for the conventional corn. So even if you're getting this BT corn and it looks good, it looks like the same thing, it's deficient in minerals. And you know, as an athlete, you don't want to eat stuff that's mineral deficient. You want to eat stuff that is nutrient dense. You want as many nutrients as you can get for the calories, right? You want high nutrients, low calories, and then you can eat tons and tons, and you're not putting on lots of fat, but you're getting all the nutrients you need to perform athletically or just to get out of bed in the morning or whatever. So it's a big problem. The BT is the big problem. The Roundup is a big problem for multiple reasons. I've only scratched the surface, and I'm just blathering. If you have questions or comments, please jump in here, because I don't want to just have to listen to myself speak for the full hour. But
the things you're saying are things that, like I said, I knew GMO, but I didn't know, I never put genetically modified and stuff like that, but I didn't know what they were attempting to do, like I said before we started. I thought they were just trying to make a bigger thing, and they were just going after yield. That's why stuff didn't taste good anymore, because they were just going after a bigger product than before. I didn't realize they were trying to make it resistant to, I didn't know about the bug attacking vegetables and the herbicide resistant.
The increased yield is the official marketing position, and it's the number one lie that Monsanto and gang put out there. We're Monsanto feeding the world lie after lie. Well, really what they tell us constantly is that they are feeding the world. And they tell us that if we don't go with their style of agriculture, that millions and billions of people will die. We can't go back. We need this because of the increased yield. If we ever do this, then we'll have intense famine and everything. Nowadays we know that the opposite is actually true. There's very little evidence that what they've done has really increased the yield at all. Just last fall, there was a traditional corn farmer who broke the record per yield using traditional corn. It wasn't genetically modified corn. There's nothing in the Roundup Ready technology or the BT technology that would cause corn to increase its yield. Increasing its yield is actually a very difficult thing to do, and Mother Nature is the queen of increasing yield, because nature is all about doing the very best you can about getting your seeds out there, as many of the seeds as you can out there, far and wide, so the crops survive. And so scientists thinking that they can drop this gene in from here and here, and all of a sudden it's going to double the yield, that's really ridiculous, because Mother Nature's been working on this for billions of years, and she's got it down. The plants that survive are the plants that were designed to survive the changing conditions. And so, they talk about having drought-resistant seeds and this sort of resistant seeds. Well, Mother Nature's already done that. In areas of drought, we've got seeds that do very well in those areas. In salty soils, we've got seeds that do very well in that sort of environment. So it's important for the chemical companies to have the consumer believe. They say, we're going to feed the world, and if we don't, people are going to die. That puts a crack in your heart. That opens up your heart, because you've got a good heart, and you don't want to see people die. And so you think, well, maybe there's something good about those GMOs. And most people don't take it any farther than that. But they don't realize that what's really happening is that the modern agribusiness style of agriculture, where we've gone from having 1 out of 2 people farming in the U.S. to 1 out of 1 out of 100 nowadays, maybe even less. We've got these farmers farming intense tracts of land, and they're not farming the vegetables that we need locally. They're farming the commodity crops. It's the corn and the soy predominantly, and acres and acres and acres of this stuff. The corn, very little of that is used to feed human beings. Same is true of the soy. That's used to feed the animals. With the corn, a good share of that is made into ethanol to feed cars, which poor people can't afford to drive, and to feed the feed animals for the meat, which poor people can't afford to eat either. And so the idea that they're feeding the world really doesn't pan out in real life. The big monoculture style of agriculture is depleting the topsoil. It's depleting the water supply. It's an extremely water-intensive form of agriculture. The scientists tell us we're draining the Ogallala aquifer in the Midwest, and they say in 20 or 30 years that could be gone. Can you imagine what that's going to do to the feeding the world motto when all of a sudden all of these farms turn into another dust bowl? If you look back on Ireland and remember the potato famine, what was it that caused the potato famine? It was monoculture. Everybody was eating potato, the same kind of potato. So one particular critter comes along and causes a potato blight, and boom, you've got a country in famine. And now you've got the whole United States being planted in 1 or 2 types of corn, 1 or 2 types of soy. And if something comes along and the same thing happens that happened in Ireland, boom, you've got huge problems.
I was going to say the yield for the corns, the yield was increased by traditional crossbreeding. And when they found the seed with the best yield, then they injected it with the DNA. Then they did the GMO to it so that they could patent it and sell it that way.
Yeah, good point.
Right, that's the other crazy thing about the whole thing is they patent things, food.
Yeah, patent living things, and then when they go off and take form elsewhere,
Right,
they find innocent people.
Well, yes, there are organic corns out there, and we've been running through Navajo country, and the Navajo, of course, when they hear that chemical companies, what they've done with the corn, and how that corn can contaminate their Navajo corn, it's like, what? And I've talked to people who are more knowledgeable on the subject, who know about this, and for them, it's sacrilege. Here is a cultural heritage, the corn that their forefathers have been using for generations, thousands of years, and now it's like another assault from the dominant culture coming in and taking their corn now. And so it's offensive at a cultural level and at a spiritual level. And some people have suggested that the contamination that happens when GMO corn contaminates traditional corn, that's by design. Because once everything has been contaminated, what do we have to fight for anymore? If everything is GMO, where's the battle? And really, I think the patent issue is at the core of the issue. If these crops, if these seeds were not patented, then what motive would the chemical companies have for releasing them? There would be really very little motive to do that. Now, if I'm Monsanto, for example, I can sell you seed this year, and I can say, go ahead and use it this year. Oh, and if anything bad happens as a result of you using our seed, we're not liable. That's you. And next year, if you want to use our seed again, don't you dare replant the seed that we sold you this year, because that violates the patent. But next year, we'll be happy to sell you more seed. And they do that for you, they do that for farmers around the world, and it literally brings in billions of dollars. And it turns farmers into indentured servants, where instead of the farmers being the caretakers of the seed and the protectors of the seed and passing the seed on from mother to daughter or whatever, they are just holding chemical company seed that's patented, and they would have to destroy it at the end of the year. That'd be their only option, and they have to rebuy. So it really turns them into servants of into a class of servitude sort of thing, where they're bound to these chemical companies to even get their seeds.
So they're doing a good contract, because maybe I misheard something at some point. I thought I'd heard that they were working on or had come up with some sort of seeds that wouldn't, once you grew the plant, that the seeds from the plant you couldn't use them.
We call that the terminator technology, and the terminator gene, meaning that the corn itself, the seeds would not grow the next year, they would not be fertile. And Monsanto tried to come out with the terminator technology. It was over a decade ago, and the public outcry was so huge that they said, whoa, we didn't mean it. But they do mean it, and they're still working on it. They're working on it in Brazil right now, again, trying to get the terminator technology introduced. And of course, if they can do that, then they do have total control, because nobody can save their seeds, and people are forced to rebuy the seeds. And again, when you play around with Mother Nature like this, it's not a matter of just having this one plant that has the terminator technology. The plants spread, their genes spread. And so if the pollen from this terminator gene goes into another plant, and all of a sudden this plant is infertile, and then it spreads its pollen, then you can see that after the potential is there for really worldwide food and plant annihilation. And that sounds really extremist, it sounds alarmist, but there was a New York University professor who just a week ago, and I've forgotten his name now, but just a week ago he came out and said that GMOs have the potential to destroy life on this planet. And he said, true, the potential is small, but he says we're not talking about a limited risk, we're talking about a worldwide risk. And each time a new crop is introduced, and into every new country that's spread, the risk then increases. When it gets to a point where there's many, many crops out there in many, many countries, that the risk does become, a certain possibility. So that's just not me spouting off. There are scientists out there saying, yeah, it could go in this direction.
The thing about a company or corporation like Monsanto is it is a corporation. They have infinite patience. They can wait for the terminator seed. That was 10 years ago that people were saying it was horrible. It was more than 10 years ago when they stopped working on wheat. And yet last year, a farmer in Washington
or Oregon, I forgot.
found Roundup-ready wheat growing on his fields. And they said they hadn't planted in 10 years. So corporations have a very long time to wait. They can be patient. They can outwait a family running across the country or some angry mothers. That's their hope.
It was over a decade ago that the American people said no thank you to GMO wheat. And now, I believe it's Montana right now is having a battle because Monsanto, again, they don't give up. Yeah. 10 years is a short time for a corporation.
But then do you hear about all these countries that aren't accepting of food from the United States? Because it's
Right.
GMO?
Yes, yeah, much of the European
I
Union
mean,
won't.
you get the poor countries like South America and us who, it's our corporation, so,
Exactly.
but China. Makes sense.
What are the top countries producing GMOs?
The United States and Argentina, was it Brazil, I think is the other South American country. I think we're the top 2 or 3 in the world. And they're predominantly doing soy in South America, which is terrible for, as much as the monoculture system of agriculture hurts us in America, it's very, very minor compared to where it hurts people in poor countries. In America, when a farmer is pushed off his farm from agribusiness, he'll put on a suit and tie, or he'll go back to school, and he'll retool himself and get another job. But if you're a peasant in Argentina and you've lived on this land that you probably don't own, and you're pushed off that land and you can no longer farm, you may or may not be literate, you don't have any money in the bank, you don't have any backup, you've got nothing, and all of a sudden your means of making an income is gone. Those people are turned into the urban poor. They flood the cities, they create new shanty towns, and they're there as a burden to society, whereas beforehand they were there out producing for their community, the local farmers. And this agribusiness style of feeding the world, really, there are people out there now who have done the studies and said that is unsustainable. It's not going to work in the long run. And the only thing that's really going to feed the world is the same thing that's always fed the world, and that's local farmers feeding local communities. If you get local farmers growing their strawberries, beans, and peas, and pears, and whatever, they can feed the people in the community. If you get an agribusiness that's got millions and millions of acres, and they're raising corn or soy, and they're shipping that around the world, at subsidized U.S. prices because of the way the Farm Bill works. These are heavily subsidized, so we introduce heavily subsidized stuff into Africa or South America. These farmers can't compete with American prices, which are not fair prices because they are subsidized, and that's another way of wiping out the agricultural market in those countries, because then people buy this cheap stuff and the local farmers can't compete, so again, they're out of business. They have to pack it up, move to the city, and try to do the best they can with in a cold, cruel world, where they can't put on the suit and tie and become business people overnight.
And these things are, everything we eat, corn and soy.
Yeah.
So for us, for me, the reason I started, my girl got me Rich Roll's book originally, and then, so last year we started Finding Ultra. And so I read that, and then I read Scott Jurek's book too at about the same time. And I went, maybe this is some do this and vegan thing. So we tried to do that. So I've been doing it for about a year. Mm-hmm. And then the more, and then we're kind of doing organic, and then, it gets expensive and this and that, and, whatever. And not eating meat helps defer the cost of buying the vegetables. But, and then you hear that, well, gee, it's in, can you actually get away from, these kinds of things if you're eating chips, or how far can you go if a lot of the corn is, contaminated throughout the country?
And it's difficult,
trusted,
isn't it? It's difficult. We've gone into grocery stores to buy tortillas, for example, and walked out frustrated because we couldn't buy any that were GMO free. So yeah, and for most people it's not an issue because they don't even know. They go in and they buy what's there, and they think corn is corn. They don't know the difference, and it's frustrating. And it took it to a deeper level for me recently when I discovered that it's not just GMO has the pesticides, and organic or conventional is okay. Because I learned that even conventional wheat, for example, that's not GMO. Wheat is not GMO. but I learned that they spray Roundup on wheat as a crop desiccant, a plant desiccant, so that dries out the plant prior to harvest, which produces a cleaner harvest. And so now you've got all these wheat kernels that were sprayed with Roundup 4 or 5 days before it was harvested. And it's there. It's on the plant. And so we've got wheat and beans and peas and lentils and whatever, multiple plants that farmers are now using Roundup as a crop desiccant on, even though they're not GMO. So it's not enough to say, well, which crops are GMOs? Stay away from those. Even the foods that we think are safe are also sprayed with Roundup. And there's new studies coming out all the time showing the problems associated with Roundup. I mentioned Dr. Stephanie Seneff and how she's connected irritable bowel syndrome, celiac disease, and gluten intolerance to glyphosate. And of course, this has not been proven scientific with the double-blind placebo, yada yada. But the correlation is strong enough that it does make you think, wow, there is something here, and why is it that people aren't studying this stuff?
There is right now, just for the next few days, a glyphosate test that you can get. Moms Across America is a group that formed. 2 moms, after Proposition 37 went down, they met in tears after it went down, and because they've seen the differences of their children taking their kids off of the GM foods and eating organic. They saw a huge difference in the way they acted and in their allergies, and so they were able to set up this glyphosate testing, and it's a urine test, and it's only through the 21st of March, so if you want to look that up, I can get the information for you, to see if there's glyphosate in your system, and if so, how much. I'll put myself on the camera.
Because I've heard that stuff, I forget if you have listened to
Is this all new to you?
Because I listen to the podcast, Rich Roll and things, so he does get a lot of good guests.
Yes, he does.
I don't make him do that. I don't say, okay, it's Rich Roll time. So he, this is, I don't know what he's learned in school or what he's talked about, but, I don't want to.
Not happening.
I'd rather have him come here and hear it from you than have me try to say, okay, we're not going to do this, and here's what we're doing this. And for something else, for him to say, well, yeah, it's just so.
Yeah, you're certainly not going to hear this, what I'm saying, in school. And my daughter's a student at BYU, and she was attending it was a plant genetics class, and she said they tried to take a balanced, measured approach to the matter of GMOs, but she felt that the professor may have even had a pro-GMO slant. And, that's the way it is. There's, you get into the academic institutions, and it's unfortunate, but, there's a lot of money out there, and there's a lot of money that flows into institutions. There's a few professors who have spoken out and said GMOs are bad because of this, and they pay for it. They pay for it in very dear ways, and for some of them, it might be a gag order, it might be a loss of their position, it might be a loss of respect or credibility. We were reading about a man named Tyrone Hayes that was documenting the effects of atrazine. That's Syngenta's favorite poison, and he came to find out that little amphibians were getting confused about whether they were boys or girls, and there were actually anatomical differences that were happening when the atrazine was introduced to the water, and he was suggesting, look, this could be a problem in the human food supply if we have all this atrazine that's being sprayed on our corn. And he was harassed and intimidated, and we know that it wasn't him just being paranoid. There were people actually following him and watching what he was saying at the conferences. And so when you speak up against the chemical companies, they have billions of dollars at stake, and you're coming out and saying, maybe feeding poison to people isn't such a good thing. You can pay for that.
Right, when I moved here in 1996, and it was the first time, I was 27. So it was the first time that I, had a place that I could say, okay, I want to make my own garden, and so I did all this stuff about, finding out about organic, farming, and, and finding out that, yes, indeed, organic farming has just as good a yields as regular farming and things like that. But it's amazing how little we've come. We've come pretty far on a local level. There's a lot more, even in Albuquerque, I've noticed a lot more farmers markets on the weekends during the summer and things like that. But the talk nationwide isn't as far along. With all that data back then, it's like.
Well, we talk about the mainstream media.
Right.
And the mainstream media gets its funding through the big advertisers. It doesn't get its funding through the little local organic gardening organizations.
Right.
So the people with the billions are the people financing the mainstream media. Last May 25th, I believe it was, 2013, was the first march against Monsanto. And some people have said that was the world's largest organized global protest. 2 million people protested. But when I ask people, how many of you watched about that on the news, how many of you watched the March Against Monsanto on the news, I rarely see a hand go up, because it wasn't covered. And it wasn't covered, I believe, because it didn't serve the interest of the advertisers. Coca-Cola would be one of those, yes. Coca-Cola spent money in both California's Prop 37 and in Washington's I-522 to defeat the efforts from the local people to get GMOs labeled.
That's one I couldn't quite understand, was the connection, like Kashi and those guys were supposedly against it too. I never did understand what their argument against it. I think it was Kashi.
Against labeling?
Against labeling, yeah.
I can't speak to Kashi. I remember when Kashi
But there was
got
a
in trouble.
couple, supposedly healthy food companies that said, wait a minute, we don't want, they went in there too, but I never did have figured out why it was that they were on that stance, or who owned them, or what.
That's the real question. It's who owns the healthy company, because nowadays many of the healthy organic companies are owned by the bigger companies, the junk food companies. And so you might be buying buying a product from an organic company that's labeled organic, but who owns that? It might be one of the big boys who did invest money in California or Washington to ensure that people thought that labeling would cause them to have to pay $400 at the checkout stand each year. Which turns out to be a lie. That's not the case at all, but that is the predominant lie that they told in Washington and California to get people to vote against labeling. If you go up and ask people on the street if they think GMOs should be labeled, and they've done this, more than 90% of the people say, yeah, why wouldn't you want it labeled? Of course you'd want it labeled. But if you go up and say, do you want a label on your product that's going to cost you $400 a year? Well, most people are going to say, no, why would I want that? And that's really what it came down to in Washington and California. People were voting on the supposed or the alleged increased cost that would come with the label, which wouldn't come at all. Because they've done the research and found that it's not there.
Right, which goes back to my thing about the organic versus, spray farming versus.
Yeah.
You get the same.
How old are you?
60.
16? Just about David's age. He's 15. So I don't know whether your dad overloads you with health-related material if he's into rich roll and organics and stuff. I know sometimes David probably feels that way too, but David this last fall, he got really good in cross-country and thought, maybe there's a connection between his healthy diet and cross-country, and so he's been motivated to eat a healthy diet, more motivated than before, although he's always had kind of a natural taste for healthy stuff. I've never seen a 13-year-old kid that'll take a box of organic greens and down the whole box like David will do, but he'll do that and say, wow, that was good. But most teenagers aren't doing that.
Been conditioned.
Right.
Those ads and darn, they taste good too.
Well, if you have any more questions or comments, we're happy to stick around for a bit, but I just want to say that we've got some stuff up here. We did a presentation. You mentioned Flagstaff. I don't know, I guess you read the webpage or something. It's a young adult novel. Olivia's read it. Kris has gotten started in it, and it sells for $12. I've got my book, We're Monsanto here. You're welcome to take a look at that. And we've got all the GMO-free USA seeds that you could ever want. If you feel like you could use these and pass them around to your family or neighbors or whatever, take them. Don't be shy. These were donated by Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company, and they provided 1,000 seed packets when we started back in Huntington Beach, and they said, Brett, the next time you need seeds, we're going to send you 3,000. So take them freely, use them, whether you plant them or pass them around, or maybe you can give them to Alec for his birthday. He'll think, woo, that's a big deal. So, and we've got some stuff from Moms Across America, some more information from Jeffrey Smith's organization, Institute for Responsible Technology, with a non-GMO shopping guide, which is great. A lot of people say, well, how can I avoid GMOs? The non-GMO shopping guide is down there. I highly recommend books from Jeffrey Smith. His GMO approach is always on the health effects or the medical consequences of eating GMOs, and I don't think anybody has researched it more carefully than he has. He's not a doctor, but he addresses doctors, and when they leave, they say, yes, they're going to take the subject much more seriously, and they are going to tell their patients about GMOs and tell them to avoid GMOs. This book, Seeds of Destruction, is a fascinating read. It's more of the political angle for GMOs and why GMOs are favored in the United States and how that happens. So it's kind of a political intrigue story, and it's very frightening. So I'm very grateful you came. You could have walked in here and think, oh boy, this is going to be an awful deal tonight. But you stayed and stuck around. We appreciate that. So thanks to you. Thanks for the coming here and wanting to learn more about this topic, and for the work that you're doing in your community and raising organics and eating healthy stuff and listening to Rich Roll's podcast and doing everything you can to be healthy in your world.